Now we're going to start talking about section 3.4. Now this is factoring. This is probably the most important section that you're going to. This is probably the most important section that you're going to see in basic and possibly college algebra. So we want to make sure that you understand it. Now there's three different things we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about greatest common factor. We're going to be talking about simple factoring. And then we're going to talk about something we call the AC method. Our first example is working with the greatest common factor. So whenever we're looking at a polynomial and they want us to factor, the first thing we need to look for is a greatest common factor. So this is the biggest thing that we can pull out of every single term. So if we look at 8 and we look at negative 10, we want to find the biggest number that we can pull out of both of those. So the biggest number we can pull out of 8 and negative 10 is going to be 2. So we pull a 2 out. Now we need to see what are the most of each variable that we can pull out. So if we look right here, we have an x squared and we have an x to the 5th. Now if you see that you have a variable that are in both or in all the terms, what you're going to do is you're going to pull out the smallest exponent. Right, so in this case that's going to be x squared. With the y's, we have y to the 4th and we have y to the 3rd. So we're going to pull out the smallest exponent, which is y to the 3rd. The reason why we pull out the smallest exponent is because if we tried to pull 4 y's out of this, it would give us a negative 1, and that's not going to work. So this is our greatest common factor. And so now we need to figure out what's left over, because if we were to multiply everything back out, we should get what we started off with. So 2 times what equals 8? Well, that's going to be 4. X squared times what equals x squared? We don't need to do anything there, so we're fine. Y to the 3rd times y gives us y to the 4th. So we're done with our first term. Now we move on to the second term. 2 times negative 5 gives us negative 10. X squared times x to the 3rd gives us x to the 5th. So y to the 3rd would be times 1 to get y to the 3rd, but since we already have some things there, we don't have to put the 1. Now if there's nothing else here, we do need to put the 1 as a placeholder, because we have to make sure that we have the same amount of terms that we started off with if we were to multiply it back out. But this is our answer. So we have 2x squared y to the 3rd times 4y minus 5x cubed. Now we're going to get into simple factoring. So whenever you're looking at a factoring problem, the first thing you still want to do is check to see if there's a GCF, right, a greatest common factor. In this case, we don't have one. So instead, with simple factoring, what we're going to do is we're going to look for two numbers that multiply to get 6, but add to get 5. So let's write down our factors of 6. So we have 1 and 6, and then we have 2 and 3, and that's going to be all the factors. So if we look for which pair add up to get 5, we see that it's going to be 2 and 3. So what we're going to do now is we're going to write these as two separate parentheses. So we have x plus 2 times x plus 3. And that's our answer. If you multiply this back out and combine your like terms, you would see that it would end up being x squared plus 5x plus 6. Our final example for this part is b cubed minus 17b squared minus 18b. Now remember that the first thing that we need to do is check for a greatest common factor. And if you look, there is something that we can pull out of all of these. Also, we can't use simple factoring on this yet because it's b cubed. We're only working with quadratic trinomials. So the first thing we want to do is pull out a b, and that's going to leave us with b squared minus 17b minus 18. Now, we need to find two numbers that multiply to get negative 18, but add to get negative 17. So first of all, let's list our factors of 18. You see that we're going to have 1 and 18. We're going to have 2 and 9. And we're going to have 3 and 6. So those are all the factors of 18. But one important thing we need to look at here is the fact that this is a negative 18. So we need to have a positive and a negative number. But we need to figure out which one's going to be positive, which one's going to be negative. If our middle term is negative, the bigger numbers are going to be negative. Right? So we're going to put a negative sign in front of all of these. That's going to give us the negative 18 that we're looking for. And now we're just looking for two numbers that add to get negative 17. And we can see that it's going to be 1 and negative 18. And so our answer, we can't forget about the b in front, is b times b plus 1 times b minus 18. And that's our final answer.